How many of you are prepared for an incident like this? Get my new book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and I will teach you to think like an attacker so you can truly defend yourself. Don't just react, act. Available for pre-order now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Sheep No More. Get it.
My name is Jonathan Gillum.
And this is The Experts. This is Jonathan Gillum, and this is The Experts on Facebook Live, Twitter, and YouTube. And tonight, I'm going to cover what happened there in Texas, why it's important not to rush to judgment and believe the things that you see constantly popping up on social media sites, let alone the mainstream media. We're going to talk about how this could be prevented, because that's basically what my book is all about that's coming out. And I just want to bring up a couple quick things, like Marilyn Manson, the weirdo whose music has motivated a lot of people to kill, and how he feels it's important to make light of that and, in fact, encourage people. I think the police should look at arresting this person for inciting people to do this, knowingly inciting them. So, let's get started. How many of you are prepared for an incident like this? Get my new book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and I will teach you to think like an attacker so you can truly defend yourself. Don't just react, act. Available for pre-order now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Sheep No More. Get it. I keep hitting the wrong thing. Yeah, I've been doing this show for 2 years, and still, I still am not perfect, and I hit the wrong buttons from time to time. And I'm sure this could be cleaner the way I do this, but I don't know. I've never been schooled on this stuff, so I have to figure it out as I go along. Okay, so anyway, let's just start off and talk about all the stuff that I was on interviews all day today on Fox News Radio. And what they do is it's incredible thing that they do. I can't remember what it's called. It's like a tour where they have this whole thing set up, and they call me every between 30 and 10 minutes, depending on the length of the interview. And basically, I just get a phone call, and it says, okay, you're connected to St. Louis. Boom, I do an interview with St. Louis. Hang up. 10 minutes later, or sometimes right after that call, I get another phone call. Now you're in San Diego. Boom, I do an interview in San Diego. And I do that all for hours and hours, going from place to place talking about this stuff. I think it's an incredible idea that Fox News Radio has done, and my hat's off to them, because it's a very well-oiled machine the way they do it. And by and large, what we were talking about today is we were set on talking about the immigration policy that was responsible for bringing this terrorist last week, or the guy that committed the terrorist attack in New York last week. But it is the lottery system the diversity lottery that was responsible for bringing him to this country in the first place. He's not the first person to shoot and kill people that were brought over on that lottery system. And then we talked about Texas and what happened down there. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about in the A block about actually what happened in Texas. But let's talk, if we will, before we even get to that point, about how these two subjects relate so closely together. The diversity lottery program, first of all, lottery should not be in that anything in our immigration system. The word lottery should not be in there at all. It's just something that should not be included in our immigration system. However, when we look at the immigration system as a whole, and these programs like that diversity program that work, it's a very socialistic mindset in that it's not fair that people in third world countries and other countries where you don't have a lot of people coming in, or people aren't able to come through that place, you therefore ask them a few questions. They have a couple qualifying points in their life that they have to have met. Not like do you not have a police record? That's not it. It's, have you ever had a job for 2 years? Have you been trained in a job for 2 years? Really looking at the merits. That's why I disagree with President Trump on this merit-based system. I think that's a part of it. But the reality is, in immigration, we don't look at who a person is. That's not what the State Department is trying to find out. They're trying to find out if they can fill a quota that the socialists in this country, the Marxists, believe needs to be filled, so they can break down each individual group to where they're easily controlled. So if there's a majority of white people with white skin, which I can't, still to this day, I'm amazed that we are defining people by the color of their skin. Amazing. But that's one of the reasons why. So if there's a majority of people with light skin, then they will work to bring in more minorities from other countries where there aren't, so they can lower the number and the percentage. If there's more Christians than there is Muslims, then perhaps they're going to try to bring in more people from Muslim countries. And this is all by design. It has nothing to do with what's best for this country. It all has to do with the socialistic belief of of weakening stronger, I wouldn't even say stronger. We're way past that in this day and age, where just because you have more people with light skin, do you think everybody that's white gets along together, or that we all have a free ride? No, it's not true. It's absolutely not true. You could be the richest, most wealthy person in the world and have kids, and those kids are going to have, they may have more opportunity or more ability to gain opportunity, but I can guarantee you, I've locked up more rich people than I have poor people. I, by and large, know more rich white people who have killed themselves than anybody else. That's me personally. The point being that it doesn't matter what you're born into. You, the person, have to take what you're born with and make the most of it. So I'll talk about that more in a minute. However, this Marxist socialistic type of ideology is fairness. It must be fair. We must allow people to be fair. And I keep saying over and over again, screw fairness. What we need is an immigration policy that's effective at identifying who a person is before we let them into this country. I mean, quite frankly, to be honest with you, there was a day and age 200 years ago when this country was, by and large, a country of immigrants. That's because besides the Indians that were here originally, everybody else that came here was an immigrant. There was very few people that were born here. So now that's different. The majority of people that live here in this country are American citizens by birth. So immigration is not as important of an issue as it once was for sustaining life in this country. It's just not. And I think that is the problem, is that socialists lean on that type of an issue of the past so that they can exploit it, and people that aren't aware of the reality, they don't even think that much. I mean, look, over 17,000, I don't even know what the numbers are now, but over 17,000 people at the time I did this tweet towards Chelsea Handler because of her stupid tweet. I'm going to go over some of those today. 17,000 people just liked her comment and allowed her to speak for them. People don't use their brain cells. People don't think for themselves. People don't go out and research truth. So how in the world are they ever going to look at what's effective? They're not. And when I say to people that forget about fairness in the immigration system, what we need to concentrate on is, first and foremost, can people prove who they really are? In other words, can they show us a police report, or a printout from a police department that says there's no record? Can they show us that they've had a real job? Can they show us that they've had a driver's license for this period of time? Can they show us the addresses that they've had for the past 5 years? Can they show us the phone numbers that they've had for the past 5 years? In other words, can they give us a clear picture of questions that we should require from them? And if they can't, then they should not come in to this country. If they can show us what we need to know, then we should move them to the next phase, which is where we screen to see what they're capable of doing. What do they want to achieve? Do they want to stay for a while and then go back home? Do they want to go to college here and get a job? See, all these different things of, are they willing to grow and assimilate in this country, or are they just wanting to hang out and party? Because that's, quite frankly, I'd rather just give somebody a party visa so they could come and party for a while, spend their money here, and then go home. I'd actually probably be okay with that if they could point out who they actually are and meet those standards. So all in all, what we're seeing is an immigration system that's just not effective. It's not effective. And it's not thought out to be effective. And the same thing goes with Texas, in Vegas, in New York City, where the terrorists ran over those people. In all these cases, people are not thinking effectively. They're thinking, I wake up every day and I don't have anything to worry about because I live in the United States. Well, that's not true. There was a day and age where we could leave our cars unlocked with the keys in it and nothing would happen. We could leave our doors open, nothing could happen. I wrote an op-ed trying to see if I can get it published on Fox News. Don't know if that's going to happen. But the first part of this op-ed is talking about, I'll read it to you, actually. I'll just read the first part of it. I don't want to spoil it in case it does get published. But let's see here. Let me pull it up. Let me pull it up here. Stand by. Everything I have that's Apple, with the exception of my pretty much new iMac, is dying. And my phone's dying faster than you can believe. I was just talking to somebody a second ago, texting back and forth, and I set my phone down and literally watched it text a paragraph and then send it. Weird to say, I didn't touch the phone. Okay, so here's the first part of this op-ed, and I'm going to read something to you here, and this should kind of strike a lot of you that are older that watch this show. When I was growing up in the Ozarks in Arkansas, let me pull this out a little bit. When I was growing up in the Ozarks in Arkansas, I remember spending the night at my grandparents' house, not far from a small town named Yellville, where I grew up as a young child. On hot summer nights, sleeping in the small living room with my sisters and sometimes my cousins, the front door would be wide open with the screen door closed. Every once in a while I laid there listening to the crickets and the frogs sing and make noises, I would hear animals stir, and on occasion a fight break out between the dogs and what we thought as young kids. We thought it was wolves or coyotes. I don't know what it was. Who knows what it actually was? Perhaps dogs, stray dogs, or raccoons fighting. But what was known by all the kids sleeping in that small living room was that we were safe and that the bad things were out there and weren't coming inside where we were located. Unfortunately, that moment of time of security via no threats is over in this country, and no matter where you live, you probably sleep with your doors closed and locked. Now, here's the thing about this, those of you that are older, that remember that day and age, you probably think, get a good chuckle out of that from your memories and stuff. But it's hard to recall when you started locking your doors or stopped leaving your keys in your car. I'm sure people that live in New York, maybe this isn't the case, but for those of us that lived in the rural areas, we remember those times, and it's hard to recall when it stopped. It's not like it was a great oppressive change in our life. It's not like it was something that was traumatic, and we've hung on to that incident that made that happen as though it was a life-shaping event. It just changed. Things in life changed. And so we have to get to that point now when it comes to realizing, by and large, anything that happens in the Middle East, we can watch the different types of attacks. And if it happens over there, chances are it's going to be a new tactic that's going to be used anywhere around the world. It doesn't have to be by Muslim attackers, although in the case in New York, they have been using this for over a year now, where they're just running people over and often getting out with knives. In the case of this idiot down here, he got out and had an airsoft gun and was wheeling that around before he got shot. So we have to realize when things happen over there, the potential of them happening over here is likely. It's like a Pandora's box, some kind of box of evil. Once they open up overseas in the Middle East and they expose it to the world and say, this is how we're killing now, what happens is, I don't know, it's as if some kind of evil picture is painted and then everybody else drops their morality, another link, and these types of killings start happening all over the world. That's why I think these mass killings are happening more and more. I think because of the Middle East, because of YouTube, because of you turn on Facebook and people are literally beating each other up and killing on YouTube and Facebook and other places, that people are their morality is done. It's like if you've ever jumped off a diving board. The first time you did it, you were terrified, and then after you did it, it wasn't that hard. You could get up there and do it again. Well, it's kind of like that. You can't watch. If you've ever watched any of those videos, you're notably changed after you watch those videos. And I think violent video games have something to do with it. I think that seeing these killing videos and the constant talk of lack of morality in politics and in media all are having a shift on these things. And so the attacks are up, the shootings are up, knifings, car killings, whatever. It's all up. Gang shootings and murder and the degradation of life and the family, it's all up. And we can trace it back to the change in the way these things are broadcast, the way people see them. But what is not changed in this country is the way it changed when big cities started to have more crime, and every once in a while one of these things would creep into the small towns, and so everybody started locking their doors. They stopped leaving their cars and keys in their car. We have not had that shift. We have not had that shift in this country now when it comes to protecting ourselves from mass murderers. I don't know why, but people just refuse to fix this. Same thing with immigration. One is too many. How many people have we had that immigrated? They don't have to be refugees, CNN, which I've heard over and over and over the past couple of years that we've had no terrorist attacks by a refugee. Listen, I don't care if it's a refugee, if it's a stowaway, if it's an immigrant. I don't care if they came down in a spaceship from Mars. If they don't answer a certain amount of questions that allow us to know who they are, they shouldn't be coming into this country. And yes, we have had people kill, as we did last week, as we did with the Sarnoff brothers, as all the people that flew the planes into the Twin Towers on 9/11. All of these attackers, and I can go on and on. The guy that killed everybody in Orlando, his father was an immigrant here. The guy that shot up the place, the recruitment center in in Tennessee, and then went to the reserve unit and killed some people there. All these people either came over or as immigrants, or their parents came over as immigrants and brought their culture with them and failed to assimilate. So just like I'm talking about how people need to protect themselves in these in churches and malls and tall buildings and stadium and arenas and wherever large groups of people are attending a service or just being together, those are soft areas. We're not thinking about how to mitigate these circumstances. And it's the same when it comes to our immigration. The civilians aren't doing it when it comes to protecting themselves. The government's not doing it when it comes to protecting us from immigrants and screening who these people actually are. There's no effective thinking going on. That's one of the reasons why I wrote the book Sheep No More. I sat on that book for years and years. In 2003, when I was working for the Department of Homeland Security through a company called AMTI, which is where, special forces go to do great things, or did go to do great things back in the day and age. They're gone now. When we were doing the Homeland Security threat assessments all over this country, the site assist visits, I was seeing this, and I started to develop this book because I was put in charge of a course called the Soft Target Awareness Training course. And it was beyond me how obscure to most people, relatively easy awareness tactics are to develop, and how you can forward think where you might be attacked. Very easy. And I started putting together this book way back then. So, unfortunately, the book doesn't even come out until December, but there's been nothing to show people. There's lots of people that have gone on the news and talked about what this book is about, but they've talked about it saying, yeah, they could have protected themselves. They could have had a shooter here. We could change the immigration system, but nobody's ever put pen to paper to show you exactly how it can be done and how you can target yourself. And that, by and large, is because they don't have the experience in targeting. I do. So that's one of the motivations in putting this book together. And I think people need to realize that regardless of whether you read it in this book or not, it's not a difficult thing to sit back and say, this is my life. I know everything about this more than any bad guy. And if I was going to attack myself, this is how I would do it. And I can't understand why people don't do that. It's beyond me. So before we even look at how the events unfolded in Texas, that's one of the main things as I go over what happened. I want you to think about that. I want you to think about What could they have done more effectively? Where were their vulnerabilities? What was the avenue of approach that this person took? And could that have been mitigated? And it absolutely could have. So why don't we do this? With that being said, let's go to the A block, and I'm going to talk about some of this stuff. And what I want you to do is think about that while I'm talking about it. I also want, if you haven't ordered Sheep No More, go order it tonight. The pre-orders have started, of course, because of these attacks. People will seek and search for books on these subjects, and so it'll rise a little bit. It's gotten a bit of a bump. But this book should be number one. Already, people should be anticipating this book. There should be thousands of them being ordered at a time for schools, for hospital faculty, for police departments. Yeah, listen, cops out there, I love you guys, but most of you do not know unconventional warfare. Which, whether it's the terrorists that hit here last week on Halloween in New York City or in Texas yesterday, which not a terrorist, which is a mentally deranged domestic shooter, it doesn't matter. They all plan their attacks in similar fashions. They all carry them out in similar fashions. And the more people that know and realize that things can be done to mitigate these things, they will want to do the things that need to be done. Clergy members, preachers and priests and rabbis, you need to know this so that you can realize, first and foremost, so you realize you're responsible for people. And secondly, everybody in your congregation, they're responsible for each other. And if you run a mall, for instance, this book should be on all the kiosks. It should be for sale in the food court so people can see it. Even if they even if they pick the book up and open it up and scroll through a few things and they realize, wow, this book is about how I could target myself. And then they put the book back up and they never buy it again. At least their minds would have been clicked a little bit. Hopefully they'll buy it. But that's what this is all about. And that's what I'm trying to get through to you. So as I go through what happened there in Texas, in the A block, I want you to think about this. Let's go to the A block. How many of you are prepared for an incident like this? Get my new book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and I will teach you to think like an attacker so you can truly defend yourself. Don't just react, act. Available for pre-order now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Sheep No More. Get it. All right. Stand by here 1 second here. Doop, 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 doop. Stand by 1 second. Had to do a little voice prompt for a text message there. So, okay, let's go over what actually happened in Texas. Now, I think probably everybody's heard it. Everybody's heard exactly what happened. But as I go through the events that happened, what I want you to think about is how these things could have been mitigated. I'm not going to go into it. I'm not going to say it. And when I get to the end, I'll say it. Let me see here. I was hoping there'd be a picture of the church here, but so first and foremost, this shooter was a bad guy. Okay, he was a bad guy. He was kicked out of the Air Force for beating up his wife and their stepson. He served 12 months in military prison. He received a reduction in military rank and was discharged for bad conduct, a step above dishonorable discharge. So I'm starting to see a series of things that happened in the Air Force that I can guarantee you. Now, mark my words on this, folks, because it's not going to be brought up in the news unless I'm on somewhere and I'll bring it up. The reason why he was not given a dishonorable discharge is because of quotas and because that would have messed with somebody's statistics. Guarantee it. He was not, for some strange reason, his record was not handed over to the local law enforcement or put into their databases. I can guarantee you that occurred because of somebody's numbers and somebody's statistics and somebody's bean counting and somebody's quotas. This is the way government works. This is the downfall of government work, is that they divvy out money to these different branches, and generals or deputy directors or whoever at political appointees, they make their money by manipulating the numbers and manipulating the percentages so it looks like they're doing better than they can. I mean, look, I did a whole study for a company here. I did it interviewing cops and to figure out in New York City, and it happens in Chicago, definitely happens in Chicago, it happens to a lot of different places, how much the numbers are skewed when it comes to law enforcement. That's why you can't believe a lot of these numbers when it comes out about shootings and these types of things and about where people are from, because the politicians and the law enforcement officers that are trying to gain rank will do what they're told, and they'll skew numbers. Officers will go and they'll arrest somebody for third-degree assault and battery or attempted rape, for instance, and as it turns out, you know, they're boyfriend and girlfriend or husband and wife or something like that. So what they'll and what they'll do is they'll go and they'll write it up as something like assault and petty larceny instead of rape, because the rapes are high, so they'll change it, not the cop, but as they submit it before it gets put into the computer, those things will be changed. I even, when I was doing my research, found that there were in certain precincts where the murder rate was high. So what they would do is when they got a call and somebody had been murdered, they would not call them as deceased. They would put them in an ambulance and drive them to the nearest hospital on the outside of that precinct where the doctor would say, yes, this person is dead, and therefore the murder would be counted as happening in that jurisdiction, not in the one that they were from. Telling you the truth, this is what I found out in my research talking to different cops. So you can understand why this individual, when it comes to the Air Force, why I believe he was not dishonorably discharged, it was one grade up, and why his records weren't given to law enforcement, because they didn't want it to appear as though they had a madman in the Air Force ranks. You can look at Bo Bergdahl, and you can see the same type of stuff happening there, where I don't believe for a second this insanity plea that they were able to use. I think Bo Bergdahl, not saying he's not a crazy loon, but I think Bo Bergdahl was fully aware of his thoughts and motivations, and he did what he wanted to do. If you look at his parents, it's a perfect example of why this guy, who he was. So right off the bat, we're looking at ways that yesterday's murder occurred and who's to actually blame for that. The guy's definitely to blame. He made the choice. But the Air Force could have mitigated that circumstance by giving him a dishonorable discharge and by putting the information to local law enforcement in their databases outside of the Air Force so that could be shared. The other thing, which I talked about on Newsmax a little while ago, is that there needs to be some type of database that what it does is when law enforcement deals with somebody, in most cases, like let's say this guy's in the Air Force, law enforcement, it doesn't have to be classified database. There's no HIPAA violation. It's not like you're looking at somebody and saying this person has a mental issue. Just simply when cops interact with somebody, that their level of violence that this person shows, the type of violence that they show, goes into a database. There's nothing that protects our rights when we do something wrong of what we've done being put into a database. I mean, it happens in the daily or in the weekly ledger in a lot of the papers where they show where people have been arrested, what they were arrested for. No different than that, except the police would be putting this into a database, and they could rank them violent, whatever. Now, that cop that arrests him for that puts the stuff in the database, and then when they When another cop interacts with them, maybe they were nice. They could say, not violent at all, actually very nice, and helped out with an old lady. It wasn't even a violent incident. And then another cop has another incident where he charts who the guy was. Yes, there was a robbery at this location, and we dealt with the manager, and the manager was really cool and, ranked that very helpful, nonviolent. Now, you have an incident where the person reacted bad. Maybe they were drinking, maybe they weren't. But maybe 2, 3 other incidents where they've interacted with law enforcement, and law enforcement gives them good grades on this database. Perfect. It shows the reality of who the person is. On the other side, in Texas several years ago, there's a woman who chased her 2 daughters out of the house and shot them in the middle of the road. That woman had 18 encounters with law enforcement, most of them of violent nature. Not only was she mentally unstable, but law enforcement, because she wasn't being arrested for crimes, her actions were violent, her behavior was violent and very confrontational. They didn't log that anywhere. So every time these cops went to go meet with that woman, there was no logging of the mental or behavioral statistics of this person. So when that person goes to buy a gun, there's not going to be any questioning about who this person is. They're just going to say, you have no police record. Boom. You're going to get your gun. Here's where I don't believe in gun control. Here, I believe that just like the immigration system, just like overall awareness, I think these are ways that we can not keep the good guys from getting guns, but we could do it to further check people who have a sketchy background. And in the case of this guy in the Air Force, even if the Air Force had given him a less than honorable discharge and not mentioned the stuff of an official record that he'd been arrested, had law enforcement had some type of database where they could chart his behavior, I can guarantee you there were multiple exchanges with law enforcement that could have been put in there. And then when he goes out of state to get a driver's license, when they find out who he is, then that could pop, and they could refer that over to law enforcement, and they could do a further interview and then find out he wasn't eligible to have a gun. That's one thing. The other thing is, I can use my phone right now with my thumbprint to open that phone. When somebody gets into an altercation with police and there is a crime committed and they're arrested, I know that their fingerprints are taken. Their fingerprints should be put into a national database. These databases are so simple and not expensive. It's the weird techie groups that make these things expensive because they overthink them, and they do that so they can sell a product to law enforcement. But this doesn't have to be expensive. It's not expensive on this phone. So when they get arrested, their fingerprints are taken. Those fingerprints should go into a database that when you go to get a gun, I don't care if you use a phone and it goes into a database. If you have been arrested, your fingerprint's in there, it would come back and say you're arrested. And if you're not arrested, you do your fingerprint, that fingerprint should not be stored in that database. It would just be an extra way to identify people who have been arrested, because evidently this guy lied on his form when he went outside of Texas. He was denied in Texas. He then went to Colorado, I believe it was, and he got his gun there. You see, these are simple fixes. They could make a huge difference in the way that things are done in this country, in the way we allowing the good guys to have weapons and making sure the bad guys don't. And then the other thing we can do is open wide up and encourage people to get their concealed weapons carry permit. Start teaching weapons safety again in schools. It doesn't mean everybody has to bring their guns to school, but you could have inert weapons there that people learn how to clean a weapon, how to disassemble a weapon, how to carry a weapon, how to conceal it if they're going to carry concealed, and most importantly, the ramifications of pulling it out and using it. Have a kind of a law class to go with it. That could be a whole semester, and people would understand why the Second Amendment came along. Now, you know the leftists in this country are never going to let that happen, but we could do that. Churches could offer that. What churches could offer that very easily. I would sit down and write a free program to churches. If they buy my book, I write them a free program so that they can teach this stuff. It doesn't take a lot of work. It's very simple. And once people realize it and they realize that, it's an empowering thing to have a gun, it's not hard to learn how to use them. It takes a bit of confidence. It takes a bit of breathing skills. And then if you're not interested in carrying a weapon, you can still play an integral role in the church or in the schools or in the stadiums and arenas or tall buildings or malls. It doesn't matter, whatever it is, by being alert individual. And that's another course that people could be taught very easily, is how to be alert. That's what this book is all about, how to be alert and aware. Just those few things that I just talked about are ways that we could solve almost all these problems. The shootings would decrease. The people that do the shootings would be known to law enforcement. If people go to buy a gun and they have nothing on their fingerprint because they've never been arrested before, they're going to be good to go. If you've ever served in official capacity, of course your thumb is going to pop, or your fingerprints are going to pop, but they're going to see that. You're a FBI agent, you're in the military, boom, no problem, good to go. Your stuff's stored, nothing you can do about that. But let's say you're some mom that you don't feel safe and you're some celebrity and you want to go get a gun. You take a course, you go down there to buy the gun, you give them your fingerprint, nothing pops. You've never been arrested. That thumbprint does not get stored, it goes away. These are simple solutions, and how I come up with these is because I think outside the box and I think effectively. One of the things I put in my book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, you see it right there on the screen. One of the things I put in the book is about a guy named Benny. It's a very quick reference. A guy named Benny that was in the FBI, and he was a senior agent, and we were doing an interview, and I was thinking outside the box. I spent so much time trying to just be friendly with the person that we were interviewing that it got under his skin, and it ended up pissing him off. But that's why I was always known as a good interviewer, because the last thing I did was ask somebody a question I need to ask them. I would spend hours with them getting to know them. They're not going anywhere. So anyway, he's mad, and he's trying to make a point that he's mad, and he pulls over to the side of the road on the way back to the office. He says, you know what your problem is? Everything you do, 90% of what you do is outside the box. This is the FBI. 90% of what we do is inside the box here. And I laughed. I don't like being yelled at by people by people in general, but I laughed at this, and I said, Benny, you just gave me the greatest compliment I have ever had, and I thank you for that. And I was very close to getting out of the car and walking home, but, I went ahead and stayed. And the point was that thinking outside the box is not a bad thing. And thinking outside the box is actually one of the greatest things that we could start doing in this country, as long as we're thinking effectively. You have to think effectively. So this guy gets out of the Air Force after doing all this stuff. There's no ramifications for what he did, wasn't passed on to local law enforcement. So, in effect, they gave him a free pass. He goes, some people you ask say he's great. Other people you ask, they say he was a violent individual, a weird individual. And apparently, one of the things about churches, it's an intimate setting. And I'm going to say this, if there's any preachers or anybody out there that belongs to a church, I want you to consider this. If you're a teacher, I want you to consider this. If you own a store or you're a manager in a mall, I want you to consider this. When you have your meetings with the people that come to your church, I forgot that word, people who work for you, the people who are in your class, if you mention to them, listen, I may not legally by law be able to ask you any questions about your life. Probably not. It's could violate privacy, and I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to ask you that. But what I am going to tell you is that if you have a problem in your life where you think there may be a domestic response by somebody that could injure other people in this school or in this church, or I want you to come to me, and it'll be in confidence. And I want you to come to me and tell me that this person has threatened me, or this person could have retribution in their heart, just so we know that if a person shows up, how to react. I mean, that alone, yesterday, if the people who used to go to church there or still go to church there, his ex-wife and his mother and his mother-in-law still goes to church or did go to church there, if she had approached the pastor and said, here's the deal, daughter's ex-husband's crazy, he's been domestically deranged, and the preacher could have said, okay, I'm so glad you told us that. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask the clergyman and the elders to ask the people that they're close to if anybody has a concealed weapons carry license, if they're comfortable sitting in the church and sitting in a tactical manner by the door, and if this guy ever shows up, we're going to know that something's going on. Do you realize yesterday wouldn't have occurred? It wouldn't have occurred. Now, I know I said I was going to tell what happened yesterday and not going to, but it's hard for me not to, because I see, and I want you to see that there's solutions to all this stuff. The school shootings, for instance. If, anybody that knew Klebold and Harris, the two guys that shot up Columbine, and there was a phone call that was made to law enforcement before they attacked that said these kids are a problem by one of the counselors, I believe it was, or parents, and it went unheeded. If these calls are made, they should be taken seriously, and faculty should be notified. And I have a feeling that faculty knew that these kids were weird and probably a little bit violent. So, getting back to what happened yesterday. It was a domestic. The guy's a very violent individual, and there was a domestic issue, and he went to the church, and he had his retribution, and he shot about 46 people, which is almost every person in that church. I think they said there were about 50 people there. He shot 46 people were either killed or injured. 26 injured, 26 killed, 20 injured. So that means everybody in that church basically got at least injured. Some of them as young as 2 years old. As he started to exit the building, from what I'm understanding from reports, the neighbor, who's a plumber, I don't have his name in front of me, realized that something was going on. And he went and got his gun, and then when the individual, I don't know if he opened the door or if he had left the door open, but I think he was somewhere around the door. This guy from outside shot him. Apparently, at some point in their exchange, he shot him in the torso and he shot him in the leg. The guy dropped, from what they're saying, he dropped his gun. I don't know if he had more gun, but he dropped his gun. He got into his car and sped away. And at that point, another guy who probably everybody's seen on television, who's got some of the craziest tattoos I've ever seen, all the way up to his neck, cowboy hat, sunglasses, like Richard Petty with tattoos. The neighbor said, we got to follow that guy. He just shot up the church. He goes, get in. And they went on a 95-mile high-speed chase with this guy. I don't know if he got pushed off. I don't know if they shot him more. Who knows? I don't really care. I wish they would have killed him right there. But evidently he had a self-inflicted gunshot wound. But I have a feeling he was dying, and probably from those two gunshots. And so he went off the road and crashed a bit and then killed himself. But they held him at gunpoint. I'm telling you, if people inside that church were as tactically sound as that individual that was outside the church, the plumber, this hero, and this driver, this hero, these two heroes, if people inside that church were minded like that and had been taught to think that way by their preacher, I'm not putting him down, that's just the way people are. The Southern Baptists, I grew up Southern Baptist and Church of Christ, they don't teach that. Those communities don't teach that. I think it's time that we move and we start preparing people for these types of incidents. If you run a mall and there's people who work there, I don't care if they're maintenance. I don't care if they work at a kiosk or if they work. It doesn't matter. If they have the ability to carry and they're not a felon. They have been in the military. They got a dishonorable discharge, and they have the ability to carry a weapon. You, as the manager, as the preacher, as the owner, should start sponsoring people in some way, shape, or form to help them get armed. One of the reasons why we have such a problem with this in this country is not because good people that get armed kill people. It's because good people that have the ability to get weapons don't get them because they're terrified by what's been instilled in them by the left. And so I blame the left partially for the deaths of those people yesterday, for the deaths of those people that were killed on the bike path. I blame them for the deaths of the people that were in Vegas because even law enforcement bows to this political pressure brought on by the left. And it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. So if you're a leftist, if you're liberal, I don't think you should be seeing things the way I'm saying it. All right. Don't think because you're liberal that you have to bow to every leftist pressure that comes out. You don't. Think for yourself. Don't be like these weirdos that go out and don't think for themselves. And don't be like these atheist activists who were coming down on the people in that congregation, that's the word I was looking for here, that we're talking about praying, or people in line like Paul Ryan. I don't like Paul Ryan, but Paul Ryan said we need to pray for them. And this weirdo guy who's an actor who was in, I think he was in Stand By Me or something like that, says, F those people, obviously prayer doesn't help at all, or else they would all be alive. Let me tell you something. People like that, their day of reckoning is coming. And I just pray. And I know this is going to be the case because I've arrested enough people in my lifetime to know that when somebody gets caught doing something wrong, they're very aware of what they've done. And the majority of the time they cry, not because they feel bad, it's because they got caught. And they're aware that bad things are coming their way because they got caught. And I pray for the day that these atheists and these leftists and that are responsible for these deaths and that have kept people from embracing their God-given Second Amendment right, I pray when they meet the Lord, and I'm not the judge, I'm not going to say whether they go to heaven or hell. That's not my job. But I do pray that just like when a criminal met me when I was in the FBI, I pray that when they meet God in heaven, that they are fully aware of what they've done. And I know that's going to be the case. And that is all the revenge I need when they stand in front. I know I'm going to. I know the things I've done wrong. I'm fully aware of them. And I can guarantee you there's a reason why whenever anybody in the Bible is in the presence of God, they throw themselves as low to the ground. They rip their clothes and get as low to the ground as they can. They're not just ripping their clothes because they feel disgusting or whatever. That's because the width of this clothing, and trust me, folks, I know this from being in Ranger School. I'll equate it to this. When you're in Ranger School and you're starving, and I've dropped a grain of rice on the ground before and got down and picked that up so I could savor the flavor of that one grain of rice. I dropped some Kool-Aid on the ground once and got down on and gathered it up, even with dirt, so I could feel the flavor. There was a time when me and another guy were carrying the trash out. I can say this now. I'm not going to get punished, but we were carrying the garbage out for the instructors in the Derby phase of Ranger School, and they had left half-eaten MREs in the trash. Well, they weren't half-eaten for long. I don't care if the instructors were spitting their tobacco spit in there. I was eating whatever was in there. When you're starving, you will savor every single ounce of nourishment that you can get. And when you're in the presence of God, even the width of this clothing seems like a mile for you to get down as low as possible on the ground in repentance and asking for forgiveness. And like a dog when they raise their leg because they don't want to be hit, you are going to try to get as low to the ground as you can be, that even the width of the fiber of your shirt is going to make a difference. If you just think, oh my gosh, I just got to get lower, 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 lower. And I hope, not just the killer, but these weirdos, like the ones who tweet out these things, like Chelsea Handler, who tweets out blaming this on Republicans, making a political statement before those people have even, blood has fully stopped draining out of their bodies in Texas. I hope when they meet the Lord, that his terror, I would only pray for them, that the terror of standing in front of the God that created all universe. If you think the sun is mighty, wait till you get in his presence. I pray that even then they repent, so that they don't have to burn forever. I'll give them that. Sometimes people are just hard-headed and they have to have it knocked into their skull. If it comes down to the point where they've already died and been risen again, they still didn't get it, but once they get in the presence of God, oh man, they get it now. They see reality. They may not be the most useful partners you will ever have in the relationship with God, but if they get the realization, at least they have it. I'll leave that up to God to decide, but I hope they get it. Otherwise, they get to burn forever. Now, I went off track a little bit there. The law enforcement response, I want to bring this up before I go. The law enforcement response in Texas was good. But what you must understand about law enforcement and their response, the neighbor that shot the guy and the other guy who picked him up, and they chased this killer and until he crashed his car and held him at gunpoint, it still took law enforcement 3 to 5 minutes to get there, according to that witness. You must understand, law enforcement is there to respond and sometimes be there when it happens. You ultimately are the master of your own domain, and you are the person that will be responsible for saving your life and the lives of others. God gave you the tools. He gave you the tools that called the rights to protect yourself. Whether it be the First Amendment and your ability to protect yourself from a tyrannical government, which we're not utilizing that properly. Whether it be the Second Amendment and your ability to protect yourself from gun-toting wackos or Home Depot truck-rented weirdos like this one down, terrorists like this one down here in New York. Imagine on 9/11, if they allowed all law enforcement, I don't know if there's any law enforcement officers on those planes that died. But imagine, folks, if you were a veteran, you served honorably, especially if you were in special forces or in infantry. I'm not going to take away from the infantry. But let's say you have to you can't just be a veteran. I think all veterans should be taught to use weapons, period. But let's say at this point right now, you have to have been in some type of operational force where they utilize guns. And then you get out with an honorable discharge. You should be able to carry a weapon for the rest of your life. If you've been a cop for 8 years, and I'm talking about people who've been in the military for at least 2 years, should be able to carry that weapon for the rest of their life without any questions, except for maybe qualifying every now and then. Law enforcement, again, you prove to... Let's say you go into law enforcement. I know people who went to the FBI Academy with me. They got to the office in New York City. It wasn't all it's, I'm going to tell you, the bureau was not what it's cracked up to be. I know people that were there for 6 months. I know people that were there for 1.5 years or 2 years. I was there for 8. But in all cases, we got out. We got out. If you go to an academy and you're on the street for any period of time and you don't screw up and you show that you've learned how to carry a weapon and learned when it should be deployed and when it shouldn't. I mean, the FBI Academy, for goodness sakes, you think that would be enough? People can go out and get a concealed weapons carry permit without taking any real courses. Whatever courses they offer, it's nothing like 18 weeks at the FBI Academy. Or doing a platoon workup in the SEAL teams. In both cases, I can't get a concealed weapon carry automatically. In new places like New York City especially. But why not give these people, can you imagine if that was the case? I can guarantee you on those planes on 9/11 there were a couple of veterans. There had to be some veterans on those planes. If even one of those planes that was flying to New York had a veteran on it that was armed, the chances are those attacks could have been stopped, and the chances are that at least 1,000 people would still be with us. But we live under some self-imposed form of restriction, and I don't get it. How did we get this way, folks? How did we become such lame duck individuals, weak citizenry? How did we get this way? You think Joe Biden's more powerful than you? No way. I don't know Joe Biden, but I can tell you this. I served with thousands of people that will never be recognized for anything more than just being a veteran or having been in law enforcement. They're never going to be a leader, but I can guarantee I'd put them in the role of vice president like Joe Biden. They would have done a better job. Why then aren't they capable of carrying a concealed weapon? They've proved that they could do it. So, with all these things, it just goes to show you that we are blowing it when it comes to protecting ourselves. And by and large, it's because the leftists in this country are the ones that are pushing, you're weak, you can't be trusted with a gun, guns kill people, so on and so forth. And none of that's true. They just want you weaker. They want you weaker so you can be subverted. I guarantee you that's what it is. On the other hand, you have Republicans who go right along with that and do little to nothing. They're not restoring our rights. They're not restoring our ability to carry in New York City and other places. They're not. So you need to ask yourself the question, what happened here? If you're going to start thinking effectively, you got to start asking yourself these questions. Now, real quick, I'm going to go to, was that supposed to be the A block, I think? Let's go to the B block. I'm going to talk about Marilyn Manson real quick, and then get out of here. I'm starting to sweat. I got to go get something to eat. How many of you are prepared for an incident like this? Get my new book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and I will teach you to think like an attacker so you can truly defend yourself. Don't just react, act. Available for pre-order now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Sheep No More. Get it. All right, I got to go back here. It looks like let's see here. Somebody was just saying that David Shaw. Somebody up here is not happy, I guess, with something I'm saying here. David Shaw. So, David Shaw, yeah, me and a dead 14-year-old girl think you all are so funny. Not sure what you're talking about there, David. Let's see here. I can't let this just pass by. Let's see here. I don't see what else he's saying here. Yeah. You know, inevitably people... gosh. Some of these trolls, when they come on, they make no sense at all. David Shaw, I'd like to give you a chance to, if you want to call in on my Skype line, I'll give you a chance to say whatever you want to say. But get ready, because I'm probably going to body slam you with truth. But it's called The Expert Show. You just go to Twitter, and then we'll pull you up on Skype, and you can say whatever you want if you can do it before the end of the show. I know David Shaw is a troll. But I want to see if one of these trolls ever take me up on it. So, David Shaw, you got the opportunity to have the floor. So, The Experts Show, that's on Twitter. The Experts, or excuse me, on Skype. You just download Skype and look at The Expert Show, and then I'll even turn it on. You let me know if you want to do that. You just say yes or no. And then we'll wait for a second, and then I'll let you come on here, and you can say whatever you want. Well, if you want controls on whoever gets guns, then let's talk about it. But I have a feeling you won't, because here's the problem, David. You want, right? But what you want, and let's face it, we all want the bad people to not have guns. I mean, we all want that. Okay, so it's not that we don't want many of the same things. And you're not too old to be a troll, David. Trust me on that one. A troll is somebody that comes on and doesn't listen to what's being said and continues to verbalize their opinion, not other facts. If you have facts that you want to go at me with, that's fine. Bring them. But the fact is, when you come on these shows, when people have real discussions, and this is nightly, you're not having a discussion. You're causing problems because you have an opinion. It's an opinion. It's not a fact. You want to know, or you want to be in control of who gets guns and who doesn't. Well, the Constitution already made that decision for us. It's called the Second Amendment, and everyone has that right. If you don't like that, then you should go live in another country like Australia where you're not going to have a gun, or go live in Europe where you're not going to have a gun. You're not going to be missed here, so why wouldn't you go and live there? The fact is, no matter if you outlawed all the guns, David, and I get it that you want to stop the killing, but okay, I'm going to talk to David for just a second. David, I want you to listen to me now, okay? Because I've been saying this the whole show, and this is how I can tell that you're not listening. The whole show I've been giving you ways to determine if somebody has a problem with their mental capacity, so they should get a further look before they get a gun. I've given you several solutions for that, but you're not interested in those solutions, whether it be the database that law enforcement keeps when they interact with people, because most of these people that have done this type of a shooting, a mass killing, have had run-ins with law. You could even have people that call in and say that I had this incident with this person, this is the type of behavior they have, and then if they pop on a database when they go to buy a gun, then there's further interviews to see if they're mentally correct. If somebody's been in a mental hospital, they should be on a database. If somebody got a dishonorable discharge or they were violent, their fingerprints should be in a database. And when you go to get a gun, it's my belief, just like on the phone, you put your fingerprints down there. If you've never had a problem, it reads your fingerprints. Those are not stored. They go away. But if you've had a problem and you've been arrested before, or you have had an issue with law enforcement in the past and you've been fingerprinted, or you served in the military and you put your hands down there, the fingerprint would pop, and then you're going to get some questions. Why, it says you're in the military, you got an honorable discharge, any running with the law? Nope. Okay, good. That's why your fingerprints were on here. How about you? Were you in the military? Yeah. Honorable discharge? Okay, now we got a problem. We got to call law enforcement here because you're not supposed to have a gun. There are ways to mitigate how people that are crazy get guns. The other thing that I want you to understand, and I hope you're listening, not typing here while I'm talking to you, because I'm talking specifically to you, David. I think it's David, right? David Shaw. I'm speaking specifically to you. The other thing that I've tried to make specifically clear is that the moment a gun was invented, they will always be in the hands of bad people. Always. You could take them all away from all the good people. There will still be killing, and bad people will either find a way to get a gun or they will find a way to kill, which was the case as we saw what happened last week on Halloween here in New York City. The guy couldn't get a gun. What did he do? He got an airsoft gun. There's no law against that. He went and got an airsoft gun. He rented a truck, which weighs 3,000 or more pounds, and then he ran over people at 50 miles an hour, and he killed 8. He killed 8 people before he crashed. So the killings are going to happen. It's the day and age that we live in. If you really want to make things calm down, go to the Middle East and stop what's going on over there, because as they kill over there and it's aired, psychologically it's opening a Pandora's box for people with mental issues or people that are bent on killing. You can see it happen. The attack happens over there in a mall. Eventually it's going to happen here in a mall, which I am predicting now that a mall has not been attacked yet. A mall is going to be probably the next biggest attack here in New York City, that or Times Square, which I talk about in my book. When it happens over there, it's going to eventually happen over here. Vehicle attacks went out the roof last year. Now it's happened here because people that can't get guns will use cars because they see it's effective over there. Now, with all that being said, how do you mitigate this stuff, David? The way you mitigate it is not by taking the rights away from good law-abiding citizen, which yesterday there were over 1 million guns in this country that killed nobody. The day before that, the same thing. The day before that, the same thing. The day before that, same thing. That's legal guns. You go to Chicago, all illegal guns, illegally purchased guns. All those killings, sometimes 50 in a weekend, are all done with people that illegally obtain the weapons, and that is never going to change no matter what law you pass. It's not going to. Law enforcement is going to be the only thing that can crack that code, and the legal system, if they start punishing people with the death penalty or life in prison if they commit an act with an illegal gun, illegally purchased gun. But the way that we are able to mitigate these killings, is if we set up better training for people that want to own weapons, so that they know how to use them, when to use them, the ramifications of using them, the laws of where they live and how they can and can't use them. If we go after the cities where they, like New York City or Chicago, where they just basically eliminated your ability to have a gun, and the federal government goes after them and stops that nonsense, where people can own a gun to protect themselves, and we encourage it for legal, law-abiding citizens, what will we find? What we find, David, and I'm talking to you, is that across the board, statistics show that when a population in an area has more citizens that are armed, one, those citizens are better properly capable of deploying and employing those weapons, and two, the crime rate drops. The murder rate drops tremendously, and the amount of mass killings is virtually non-existent. Remember, or mass shooting, I should even say. A mass shooting is where I think it's 3 or more. At one point it was 4 or more. 3 to 4 or more people are shot. Happens in gangland all the time. Imagine Chicago in the inner city. If all those people were allowed to own, that are legal, law-abiding citizens that don't have criminal records, were able to get a gun and be taught very cheaply, either by practicing with NRA classes or the government putting up databases where you can go and watch courses that show you and teach you all this stuff and teach you how to practice. Those people, their lives would be prolonged. The gang members would die eventually. And believe it or not, the relationship between law enforcement and the community would get stronger. That's also proven. So the point is, if you want the killing to stop, taking the guns away from law-abiding citizens is not the way to go. It's actually opposite of that. Encouraging people to be armed, giving them the education that they need to properly employ those weapons, and empowering your citizenry. That's the way it's gonna. That's the only way this is gonna be solved. It's the same as I was talking about at the beginning of the show. Back when I was younger, nobody locked their doors. We left our keys in the car, and nothing ever happened. And then a shift changed, mainly in the big cities, and then it trickled out into the small towns where robberies started, abductions, car theft. And so people locked their cars. They didn't leave the keys in there. They locked their doors. They locked their windows. And we don't feel trapped. We just feel secure now. And I predict the same thing. If more people were carrying weapons, eventually what would happen is that we would start to feel more secure, because literally the crime rates would drop. So, Dave, if you don't get it from there, and I'm not trying to insult you or call you a troll, but if you don't get, if I can't explain it to you anymore, that's the truth. And I'm not trying to convince you to be a conservative or a liberal. What I'm trying to convince you to be, and it sickens me when somebody writes a story about me, because I said something about Bergdahl the other day, and some wacko writes this story. He says that I'm a right-winger. I'm not a right-winger. I do not like the Republican Party. I don't like the Democratic Party. I don't like the Libertarian Party. I don't like parties. I like a strong, empowered citizenry. And I like the truth. And I like to face the truth. And if we got a problem, I like to find an effective way to fix it. And this is the truth. And so I'll take your apology, and I'm sorry I called you a troll. And listen, Dave, I'm with you. Dead children upset me tremendously. That's why I served in official capacity for 15 years. And I'm not lying. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not gonna lie to you. It bothers me that I never got to kill a bad guy who was trying to do something to children. I know that sounds sick of me, but I didn't learn and train to be a killer so that I could walk around with a gun on my side. I trained to do that job because I knew I was responsible enough and good enough at what I did to step out and rid the world of these people. Unfortunately, you can't go around being judge and jury, but I never found myself in that position where I was able to utilize my skills against that type of a person, unfortunately. That's how much I hate child predators. So I'm with you on that. And see what we just had there, folks, and I'm going to end it on this. Well, I'm going to talk real quick about Marilyn Manson, and I just want you guys to take note of this if you have children. That is called dialogue, what we just had. Even though it's text to voice, that's dialogue. So let me just say this real quick about this idiot Marilyn Manson. Let me go back here. See if this is up here. So this fruitcake here, this is that weirdo Marilyn Manson. He fell down and unfortunately survived a fall or something crashed on his last set. Here he is pointing, it looks like an airsoft or just a rubber gun out into the crowd and talking about, and I'm taking a direct quote from this story on Fox News. He's singing the song Beautiful People. He's in a wheelchair due to his leg injury. And he said, he pointed at the crowd while singing, "We know where you effing live." Okay? He said before in an interview, "Certain people blame me for the shootings at schools. I think my numbers are low, and hopefully they go up on my upcoming record." So I'm not sure exactly what he's saying there. If he's saying that his numbers on his records are low and that he hopes they come up, or the number of people that are killing because of his music. But I think that warrants, if anybody is caught doing a mass shooting and they say that his music played a part in it, because of that statement right there, certain people blame me for shooting at schools, for shootings at schools. I think my numbers are low, and hopefully they go up on my upcoming record. That's disturbing, and I don't know in a court of law if that could potentially be, he could be brought up on charges of inciting people to kill, but if somebody says they did it and it has something to do with one of his records, knowingly saying what he said, I think would be something that attorneys should pursue. I don't care what his music sounds like. Folks, you should boycott this guy. Don't let this guy, his music into your home. Don't let your children listen to it. If you listened to it in the past, stop listening to it and just get away from this guy. All right, let's go to the Truth Zone. And that's an hour-and-a-half show. Or an hour, a little over an hour. All right. And Dave, thank you for the dialogue, and thank you for caring. You're a passionate person. I don't fault you for that at all. What we had was dialogue, and that is important. Let's go to the Truth Zone. How many of you are prepared for an incident like this? Get my new book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and I will teach you to think like an attacker so you can truly defend yourself. Don't just react, act. Available for pre-order now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Sheep No More. Get it. All right. So, I think I've discussed enough of this about awareness. Feel free to share this show if you have not shared it. Share it on Facebook. Retweet it on Twitter. Make sure that you get the word out. interesting, but a lot of times the show actually starts to populate after the show is over with. But it's very important that you all share this. And I got to tell you, I want to give a shout out to everybody that donated last week and into today on the GoFundMe page. I said last week that the GoFundMe page has had no movement in like 2 months. You all started the movement again. If we can continue this movement, as soon as December 12th rolls around, I'm going to be traveling. I'm going to have to travel because I want to get this book out there. I'll be driving around with a stack of books in my truck, or you could order on Amazon, and then you'll have them, pre-order them now, and then you have them, and as I'm going around in December, I'll be able to sign those. Again, I want you all to realize if you have connections in schools, in churches, and if you're close to your preacher or your priest or your rabbi, if you are close to your mayor or chief of police, people need this book. If you work with battered women's shelters, we need to get donors to buy this book now so that when it comes out December 12th, it's in those shelters. It's in the schools. It's in the malls. It's in the stores. It's in the churches. It's in the facilities where there's thousands of people working there. This book should be selling by the millions, not so I can get rich. This book needs to be selling by the millions so that people realize exactly what we were talking about today, exactly what I was talking with David about just a second ago, that you are the answer. You, not more cops, not less guns. You, an empowered citizenry, and a citizenry that is I'm not just talking about ego. I'm empowered. I'm talking about with a skill set, empowered with a skill set. This book is going to give you a skill set. It's not a long read. It's not a hard read. In fact, I'm glad that I wrote it and not somebody else, because it probably would have been a little bit more difficult to read. It's a very easy book to read. I'm from Arkansas. We're simple people. You need to get it. You need to get these people who have access to money and have her owners or managers of these facilities, and we need to get them interested in the reality of how important a purchase like this is. Forget about cameras. Forget about all these sneaky peeky things that you can buy. Turning lights on and off. Folks, if you want to be secure in your home, here's the 3 things that you need to get. A dog of any kind. It could be a small dog, it could be a big dog. As long as it barks when somebody's around, you're going to be more secure. Secondly, you need to get this book right here. And you need to go through it and employ the method of targeting yourself that it teaches, and the understanding of bad guys that it teaches, and the understanding of defenses, accurate defenses that it teaches. And then you need to get yourself a security package, which includes a gun, a flashlight, and a loud air horn. And keep those in your house. I'm giving you the tools, folks. Take my advice. Share this show. Heed my warnings. It's you. We're going to make the change. Rico and I are going to go for a walk now. I'm Jonathan Gillum. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. How many of you are prepared for an incident like this? Get my new book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and I will teach you to think like an attacker so you can truly defend yourself. Don't just react, act. Available for pre-order now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Sheep No More. Get it.